Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
You're listening to the Sportsman's Nation Podcast Network, brought to you by Interstate Batteries. Interstate Batteries has thousands upon thousands of retail locations all over the United States, and they offer great batteries, right? Now, I got a buddy who is kind of a car nut, a truck nut, and he told me that, I guess on the research that he's done for car batteries, Interstate Battery car batteries and truck batteries are some of the highest quality, most reliable truck batteries that they have on the market. I don't know anything about it. It's just what my buddy told me. So if you're looking for a new car or truck battery, you need to go to your local retail, Interstate Battery retail shop and go pick one up, because I guess they're badass. So I know I have one in my truck. Other than that, if you have TV remote controls, Interstate Batteries makes a battery for that. They make batteries for your rangefinder, your trail cameras, and basically any other electrical device, for the most part, that you use while hunting or fishing or being outside. They also have a whole bunch of other little knick-knack products too, like my buddy Dan Spano. He is a manager for his family's Interstate Battery retail location. He got me some of these cool flashlights that have switches on them. One of them looks like a lantern. So they have a whole bunch of that stuff too. If you want to find out more information about the kind of batteries that Interstate Batteries makes, head on over to interstatebatteries.com or visit your local retail store.
Told you, been kind of in a funny place about hunting. You know, it's all kind of snowballed on me. The whole, you know, whether it be the shaming for shooting smaller deer, whether it be how we've changed hunting from the craft, as Mike said earlier, to more of a let's build an ecosystem and invite deer into it kind of thing. All that's kind of just compounded on me here in the last few years, and you know, every year I find myself struggling a little more to make sense of all of it. And I just wondered if I was by myself. You know, I kind of think, am I just out here on the island by myself feeling this way or whatever? And so it's just really unique that he calls me the other day. We're talking on the phone, and he says, man, he goes, I'm kind of I'm going through a midlife crisis on this deer hunt.
My name is Clay Newcomb, and I'm the host of the Bear Hunting Magazine podcast. I'll also be your host into the world of hunting the icon of North American wilderness, the bear. We'll talk about tactics, gear, conservation, but we'll also bring you into some of the wildest country on the planet, chasing bear.
I feel like an astronaut. When are we going to take off?
I feel like a race car driver. Scott, I was just thinking about, I remember when you remember in the Walmart parking lot. This wouldn't have been the first time I met you, but it would have been the first memory I have of you. Walmart parking lot. I was 16 years old. Mena, Arkansas.
That was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
Okay.
just
All
a couple
right.
years ago.
Yeah.
16 years old, because that's when I started working at Walmart when I was 16. And I remember you were probably you're a few years older than me, but when I was 16, you were a lot older than me.
Uh-huh.
I mean, you were like just like in a different league of life.
Yeah.
And I remember you and somebody, it may have been one of the Clark brothers, came up into the Walmart parking lot. I was pushing buggies working for Walmart. And I knew you were a hunter, but we didn't really know each other because are you 5 years older than me?
Well,
4.
I'm 42, so.
You're not that much older than me. I'm 40.
Okay. Well, we're just 2 years apart then.
Well, I think in school you were at least 3 years.
I was probably 3 grades ahead of you
Okay,
in school.
so yeah. And so I remember I started talking to you about hunting in the parking lot, and you said, man, I'm hunting a big deer. And you said, if I kill this deer, I vividly remember this. You said, if I kill this deer, everybody in this town is going to know about it.
Yeah.
I distinctly remember that.
Yeah.
And then you killed a deer that everybody in the town knew about.
Yeah. I'd have been 19. So you'd have been 16. I was 19 when I killed that deer.
Yeah.
And, I'd never seen that deer. That was before game cameras and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So you're just going off of what, the sign that I was seeing. So, I'd found some sign. I had a little inside information on a guy who had seen a bachelor group of bucks in early season in this area, and it happened to be kind of in my backyard. It was and I say
public
that,
land.
I say
public
that,
land.
I say that figuratively. I grew up. My childhood, I grew up at the foot of the Ouachita Mountain range, and literally my back door butted up to, just acres and acres and acres of national forest land.
Yeah.
And where these deer were seen was just kind of in some really familiar ground for me. So kind of perked my interest, and so went in there just on a whim, trying to see if I could find any sign, and ended up finding, some of the biggest buck sign I'd ever seen up until that point in my life. And, I think that's what hunting was back then. What I found the first day I went in there was a rub.
Yeah.
It was, it's probably a 5-6 inches through hardwood.
That's a big rub for around here.
Yeah, hardwood tree, all that, and it was enough for me to hang a stand. It was just that's all I needed to hang a stand back in those days. I didn't have to have, all the stuff you have to have today to feel confident about hanging a stand. So, I just really went off of a gut feeling that this was going to be the biggest deer, that I'd ever seen. And sure enough, it ended up being the biggest deer, even to this day, still the biggest deer I've ever killed. Yeah.
In a world of fast-paced media, Instagram, Facebook, podcasts, just like this one you're listening to right now, there is a type of media that remains timeless and unchanged in some way, and that's print. Bear Hunting Magazine, been in print for 20 years, and we aren't going anywhere. This is a classic thinking man's, the Renaissance man's outdoor media. I love getting print magazines mailed to your door, product you can hold in your hand, a product that doesn't evaporate with the day, but remains. Bear Hunting Magazine is an old-fashioned print magazine with all kind of new stuff. It's like the magazine your grandpa read, except way better and modern and relevant. Check out Bear Hunting Magazine for just a couple more days of $15 subscriptions at bear-hunting.com. That's bear-hunting.com.
So we've got Mike Schultz, my uncle. He's sitting here. Mike, let me tell you, when Scott killed that deer, the deer ended up scoring 156 inches.
That's right. Yep.
Yeah.
I remember vividly. At the time, a 156-inch deer in the Ouachita Mountains was pretty much unheard of. People killed deer that big, but a good hunter would kill maybe one of those in a lifetime.
Yeah.
That's very true, but not every good hunter would kill one of those in a lifetime here. It was a top-end deer. And I vividly remember that because you called it, man.
Yeah.
And you know what? That story. So Scott ended up killing that deer with his bow, public land, and that my entrance to friendship with you, I would say, has followed that trajectory, Scott, of you saying things that happened and were true. I was telling Mike on the way up here there, and I don't know if I've ever told you this, but there are probably 5 people in my life that have had significant influence on me in hunting, and you're one of them.
Oh, wow.
For real.
Well, I've come to the conclusion after listening to you, I had never thought of it, that I called my shot that day, but maybe I need to do that more often.
Yeah. You need to call it.
Because, I've been more confident before and never come up with anything, So maybe I need to call my shot more often.
Yeah.
It's funny that you talk about Walmart and how you met me through that day and that incident, but my first memories of you, I didn't even know you. I knew who you were. I knew your dad, and your dad was kind of a pioneer bow hunter in our area.
Yeah.
When I took up bow hunting, there wasn't, in all reality, I don't know that there was a dozen bow hunters in town. That there were some guys that were into archery a little bit, but not a whole lot of hunters. And, we had if you'll remember there, we had a trophy board back in the sporting goods area. And
yes.
If somebody,
that was basically the Facebook of 1994.
That's correct. Yeah. And so if you
go to Walmart to see the pictures on the wall.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I can remember going back there, and this was, I was only, I couldn't have been over 14, 15 years old when I first started seeing pictures of you back there on that board with these bow kills, and man, you said it a minute ago, shooting a deer back then with a bow, especially in the Ouachitas, was a feat in itself. And to come in there and see you on the board, and it wasn't this big old huge buck, it'd just might be a doe, maybe a 3-point or whatever it was, but it was just uncharted territory for kids, our age to shoot a deer with a bow,
Yeah.
And so I knew of you, and I had a lot of respect for you before I ever even met you, because I just seeing somebody of my age group shooting deer with a bow and that kind of thing. And so I'm not going to lie, it sparked a fire in me a little bit to take bow hunting a little more serious.
You were killing deer before I was, though, but you were killing with a rifle, I guess.
Yeah. I hunted years. I say years. It seemed like a half a lifetime. Like you said, when you're 16, 3 years is a long time. Yeah. But I think if I remember right, I think I shot my first deer when I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
With a rifle, and hunted 1,000 hours to do that. Just hunted and hunted and hunted for years, and never had an opportunity to even shoot a deer. And I shot my first deer when I was 12 with a rifle. And then I got into bow hunting. I think I was 14 when I got my first bow. Now I could be a little off of that, but I think I was 14 when I got my first bow. Started bow hunting, in the Ouachitas, and I never forget getting up in the tree stand thinking, man, I've hunted entire gun seasons and only seen 2 or 3 deer. And here I'm sitting with this bow where and back then, a 40-yard shot was a mile back then.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there thinking, realistically, I've got a weapon here that can shoot 25 yards, What am I doing? And, it took
It's daunting.
Yeah, it is. And I remember the first deer I ever shot at, I shot at 3 times and never touched it, And so that really started putting bow hunting in question,
Yeah, no doubt. Well, hey, the first story so we knew each other the same way.
Yeah.
Our dads knew each other.
Right.
And you were a little bit older than me, and our dads didn't necessarily hunt together or anything. They were just kind of in the community and knew, my dad knew your dad was a really good hunter, which Scott, Mike, I'm going to introduce you better in a minute, Mike Schultz.
Sure.
Let me tell you something. Andy Brown, Scott Brown, and their group of hunters are as good a regional hunters as there are on the planet, in my opinion. I mean, for real. Like if you were in Colorado and there was a family of hunters that didn't travel, they just knew how to hunt Colorado. They aren't any better than Andy and Scott Brown and these guys. I mean that. And that's something that my dad, and I've said it so many times on this podcast, taught me to respect, was people that knew how to get it done wherever God put them, you know. I mean, because we kind of saw this influx in the 90s when we were growing up into hunting of people that had money or ability to go places, kill these big deer. It's kind of when people first started going to the Midwest to kill big deer. And at the time, the only people that could do that were people that had money or had some path that we didn't have. The guys that could kill big deer consistently, especially here. And man, in the 90s here, the Ouachitas were as tough as anywhere on the planet to hunt a whitetail deer, a mature whitetail deer. It's gotten better, I think, now. There's probably more deer than there's ever been. But anyway, well, okay, I was going to tell the story. So we knew each other. I knew you just through stories.
Yeah.
And so I am probably 8 years old. And my dad said that I vividly remember, I think I remember where I was standing when he told me the story. That he said, "Hey, Clay, I heard a story." And I think Steve Phillips told it to my dad. And,
well, I'm sure it was just as big as it was.
Yeah.
Love that guy.
Yes, yeah. And he said Andy took Scott turkey hunting the other day, and you would have just been a kid. I mean, if I was 8, you'd have been 11.
Yeah,
something
right.
like that.
Yeah.
And he said Andy took Scott out hunting the other day, and Andy told Scott to not shoot at a walking turkey.
Yeah. That's
and
right.
so Andy called up the turkey, and it just walks right in and never stops. And Scott never shoots it, and it just comes right in. And, I mean, it was just like, oh, man, what a rookie. I mean, I remember just being like, that's Scott Brown. He what a rookie. And then Scott ends up being probably the best turkey hunter that I know. So our history was we both ended up moving to Fayetteville.
That's right.
To go to college at the University of Arkansas. You were like a senior, junior when I would have got up there. And that's when we really developed our friendship. So I would have been I think I was 21. So it's kind of like we knew of each other and had a little bit of experience. But, Scott, you described to me better than anybody how to hunt the mountains.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I vividly remember we hunted a wildlife management area. And I don't have any problem saying the name of it because we don't hunt there anymore. Madison County Wildlife Management Area. Yeah. It's not even called that anymore.
Yeah.
But it was the perfect Ozarkian habitat. I mean, like steep hollows, lots of bluffs. It was just like perfect, heavily forested mountain hunting. Yeah. And I remember you told me, you said you need to look for saddles, which are low spots on tops of ridges. You need to look for trails at the heads of hollows, where fingers come together. And you just painted it such a picture that I understood. I was like, oh, okay. Because even though I grew up down here in the mountains, we actually hunted south of here in a little bit more of the flatlands, you know. And so you described really well for me. You just painted a picture that nobody else had. No, that's number one. I learned it so much during those years. I was like a sponge talking to you. Number two, you taught me how to tell a deer story. You really did, whether you know it or not.
Yeah.
And I said this before to somebody recently, is that I've noticed in being around a lot of different people from different parts of the country inside of hunting, you and your family and your people value a story about as much as you value the hunt.
Well, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you anymore.
I mean, and I'm going to talk for a minute here. I'm going to eventually let you talk. I remember one time I called. It was back before Facebook and just like we communicate quite a bit now. But there was a time when we didn't. We probably talked when we didn't live in the same town. And I'd call you a couple times a year, and we'd have a 2-hour talk on the phone. Mm-hmm. That's the way communication was. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I mean, that was before even cell phones. You had to dial in on a hardline phone to have a phone conversation.
Right. I remember one time I said, "How's your hunting been?" And you started telling me a story. And I was absolutely riveted at this story. I mean, it was just like, you walked me through like the morning routine, what it was like walking in the dark to the stand, what it felt like when you got in the stand as the wind went across your face, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And at the end of the story, my eyes are just bug-eyed, and I'm like, he's going to tell me he killed a 180-inch buck on public land in Arkansas. And you were like, a doe deer walked out. Yeah. And I was just like, yes. But the whole story was about a doe deer, and it was the best story I'd ever heard.
Yeah, yeah.
But I can't do it as well as you can. But you taught me how to tell a deer story, and I've noticed you're just a product of your dad and other guys that y'all hunt with.
Well, I grew up, with the luxury of having a father that was a good hunter. He had a family that taught him how to hunt and so on. So to say that, I just was born some great turkey hunter, I was, some good deer hunter or whatever, I owe all that to my dad. My dad, he taught me how to hunt these mountains around here in a time when there was very few deer around here.
Yeah.
And, I think about as a kid, my dad would load me up in his truck and we'd go to my great uncle's house. It'd be my dad's uncle. His name was Ira Willis. He grew up hunting, in the 50s and 60s and 70s when deer populations were even less,
Yeah.
And we'd go in there and we'd sit down in his living room, and he's a big old guy. He'd just sit down over there in his Big Smith overalls, and he'd start telling these stories. And I'm telling you, you were right there sitting in the blind with him, or you were, he would just tell the stories to the everlast detail. And you were there the whole time, with him. And of course you're getting a history lesson too. He'd tell those stories that happened years ago. just like.
Was he the guy that just expected you to know every saddle, every gap, every ridge in this county?
Yeah. I was all of, 12 years old or whatever, 10 or 12 years old. And he'd go tell these stories, and he'd say, well, you know where that big leg ties in over there, and you'd trying to tell the story, trying to put me there with him,
Yeah.
And finally you just have to say, yeah, so he'd go on, and it was,
or he'd stop and try to tell you where it was at.
Yeah. You'd just be like, so finally you just nod your head. Yeah, I know where that's at. And then he'd keep going, and he'd tell these great stories, man. And so blessed to have spent just a few years of my childhood with him. He passed away when I was a teenager. So, I didn't get to spend a whole lot of time with him, but my dad would credit him.
Okay.
Is probably teaching him more about hunting than any other person in his life. Now,
Ira Willis.
Well, he was just a true outdoorsman. He came up in a time where you hunted out of necessity. It's a totally different thing than what we experience today. But he come up in a time when you hunted out of necessity. You hunted for food to help sustain you. He come up through the latter years of the Depression and those types of things where work was hard to find, and it was important that you hunted and did those types of things. And so he mastered his craft. And so to sit there and listen to him talk, we didn't
do you remember how he told stories? Did he I don't know, what was it? Do you think your dad learned how to tell a story from him?
I think so. Because when you hear my dad tell a story now, it's very similar to him.
Yeah. When you're not around me, I tell stories like you do.
Well,
when I talk to you, I realized this the other day. A lot of times when you're like, well, tell me the story. When you're around somebody that you perceive as a better storyteller than you always kind of just cut it short.
Well, I think my dad. He tells stories a lot like my great uncle. People say that about me all the time. Boy, your dad can tell the best deer stories, or the best hunting stories, or fishing stories, or whatever it is. But I think my dad would give him all the credit for being able to tell a good deer story.
A lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But hey, we're like 20 minutes in. Mike Schultz. I got to introduce Mike.
Yes, sir.
Mike is my. I call him my uncle. He's actually my wife's uncle. But Mike's my traveling buddy today. He rode down here with me, but Mike has quite a bit of experience hunting, even different parts of the world. Hunted a little bit little bit here and there, hadn't you, Mike?
Yeah, a little bit in Africa and Zimbabwe, and
Yeah.
Yep,
Texas, and now you live in
Texas.
Arkansas.
that's right.
Mike Schultz, both of you guys are massively influential in my life, for real. I'm not just saying that. Mike is not just a professional photographer. He is a photographer's photographer. He really is. And Mike's published numerous books. Mike's a published author, but Mike taught me years ago. I mean, a lot of my career right now, I attribute a lot to Mike, because a lot of what I do right now is visual stuff with photography and video, and Mike taught me how to view light. He taught me how to use a camera. He taught me what was beautiful and what wasn't. For real. Like, I remember Mike one time we were riding down the road, and I'm seeing similarities in some ways in my relationship with both of you, and I'll explain. I remember one time, probably 2005, 15 years ago, riding down the road, and it was getting late in the evening, and the sun hit this mountain over in the Ozarks. And Mike said, "Look at the way the light's hitting that little section right there." And it was the first time I ever thought about light. And if you're a photographer or in any kind of visual videography, light is everything. Mm-hmm. Everything. And we started talking about light. And anyway, it opened my eyes. It gave me some sight. So anyway.
Clay was a quick study.
Yeah.
Just a few words and he grasped it and took off, and I watched his photography just explode. I mean, very, very definite eye that he has, and ability to capture, especially capture people and environments around people. So, yeah.
And Scott, I'm kind of jumbled here, but Scott, you also, the third thing that you taught me was an appreciation for the Ouachitas. You really did. I mean, I grew up here, so I did have an appreciation for them on my own. But when we moved to Fayetteville, you said, when I close my eyes and think about where I want to sit to deer hunt, and you'd name the place that both of us know.
Yeah.
You kind of painted this picture of this just like larger than life thing, and it was just a place that was just hard to get to and beautiful and kind of mysterious, in that, you know, nobody's running game cameras back in there to see if there's big deer back there, but you know that there is.
Yeah.
And that influenced the way that I viewed these mountains big time.
You know, that place that you're talking about today, I would tell you that today the same as I told you that
I know you would.
15 years ago. When I sit and think of a place I'd like to spend a day sitting in a tree, just sitting there, I'd still name that place. And there's a far more likely chance that I would not see a deer sitting there. Right. But I would sit there the entire time thinking that any minute it was going to happen, you know, and be happy about it. You know? Mm-hmm. Beautiful place. There's something about the Ouachitas, though. You know, when we moved to Northwest Arkansas and started hunting the Ozarks, it was a big change. You know, it was different. But why? You think about it though. The hunt was so good up there, but every chance I could, I came home to come hunting. Yeah. You know, so make sense of that. You know, it's just
right.
You had a lot better chance of shooting something up there.
It's part of, and even you talking about this specific place that you love. So much of our hunting, the value that comes from it, comes from, and Johnny Carroll Sane, my buddy, said this 2 podcasts ago, it comes from our connection to place, quote unquote. Our connection to place. What is our place in that environment? Yeah. Like, and I talked about how when I go to Canada and kill a big buck up there, man, I love it, and I'm going to keep doing that. I enjoy that. Yeah. But it doesn't mean to me what it would mean here to kill just a good buck. Yeah. It does not, because I don't have a connection to place up there. Yeah. I don't fit really up there just because of natural. I didn't grow up there. Right. There's value in roots. There really is, man. And some people don't have real strong hunting roots or whatever, and that's you know.
Yeah, I was thinking with Scott, just the lineage of your family here has, I think, probably produced that sense of place inside of you. Those stories that your grandfather told and your dad would tell produces something here that goes beyond the game itself, goes even beyond hunting. It goes beyond. It's a love of the place. That if it was so good there, most guys would have gone up there and stayed up there. Oh, the hunting's phenomenal. I'm going to go hunt. And they would have moved there. And you didn't. You came back here.
Well, like me in Northwest Arkansas, Scott, I think I told you this before, but I had this epiphany like last year. I could drive the same distance northwest and be in southeast Kansas. In some of the best hunting in the country for deer. But you know how much I drive due south. And coming to this rough country to hunt. I'm after something different. I mean, if I was just trying to kill big deer, I would forget this place.
I totally get what you're saying.
And there's value. There's added value to anything that is perceived as valuable by the people that you value.
Oh, yeah,
sure. You follow me?
Yeah, oh, yeah, sure.
Like your dad and your great uncle. I mean, not that hunting is about pleasing someone else, but hunting does gain a lot of value from our social connections, massively. Like I've thought before, like, would Clay Newcomb hunt if I couldn't tell anyone or there was no one connected to it that valued it as well? That's a fine line to walk, though, because if you go too far down that and then you say, well, are you hunting just to impress people? And the answer to that is no. But when I kill a deer in these mountains or a bear, you're one of the first people I call. Are you not?
Oh, absolutely.
And do you know why I call you and not, my other buddy that I hunt Canada with? I call you because you value this place. And you know what I've just done. And so, I reach out to the person that's going to probably validate that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And that's a fine line to walk because, the trend of the age, especially with Instagram, and Scott's not on social media, he's disconnected, which is he's like a primitive man. We're getting a high five. Neither is Mike.
I'm waiting.
Both these guys aren't on social media. The trend of the age is that people are building these Instagram profiles and identity. They're just false. It's just not who they are. They're doing things that they wouldn't do, except for that they know they're gonna get a good photo, put it on Instagram, get immediate likes. They get a release of satisfaction inside of feeling like they're something. So, again, the pendulum is that, but the core of something that I think is healthy is to have true relationships with people that they can value and celebrate. They can celebrate what you've done, and I celebrate what you text me pictures, call me when you kill something here too.
Well, it's funny you bring it up because when you came in, we're of course, on the podcast, you can't tell where we're at, but we're in a room here where we've got deer heads hanging on the wall and different things. And we pointed out a deer that I'd shot several years back with my bow. I shot that deer, watched him just run out of sight, picked up my phone, and within 5 minutes, I was texting you, man, I've just shot a big deer. I actually had service there where I shot that deer. And, I couldn't wait to tell you. Because where I was hunting was kind of in your neck of the woods, like where you like to hunt. And I thought, man, if anybody's going to appreciate this, Clay's going to appreciate this. So, man, I couldn't wait to text you and tell you that I just shot a big deer. And I hadn't even trailed the deer up yet or anything, but I knew, the arrow was good. I knew it was going to, I knew it was going to be a done deal, and I just couldn't wait to tell you the story. But, I think there is a lot to what you just said. If we didn't appreciate it together as a group, how interested would you be in hunting? I don't know. I don't do it to brag about it, but I do it to share experiences with my closest friends and people who appreciate what I appreciate and that type of thing, So, and just like you said earlier, you mentioned that this big long story I drug out just to tell you I shot a doe. Well, man, that was a big deal to me, know, and it still is today. I'd still lead you down a long story to tell you about a doe I shot today.
Yes.
I still get appreciation for that like I did, 20 years ago, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And I know you do too. And so
Absolutely.
That's why I tell you the full story.
I was thinking, do you remember that doe in the snow in Madison County?
I do. Absolutely.
Do you remember me chasing that fully live deer?
Yeah, I do. That was the greatest. I tell that story about 2 or 3 times a year to somebody.
Do you really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I tell
it. See, I bet it's been 15 years since I heard you tell that. But I knew that you told that making fun of me.
Oh, my goodness. So, yeah, we're in Madison County, up there hunting in a management area. It has snowed.
Which is pretty rare for Northwest Arkansas. Fairly rare.
And it was a pretty good snow. Like that's 4 or 5 inches of snow on the ground, and we just could not wait. It was late archery season.
When do you think it was? January?
I'd say it was in January.
Yeah.
Probably in January. So, and it was cold, real cold. So anyway, we go up there and spread out on, this management area has these food plots. And I think you and Josh sat on some food plots for the evening and saw just a pile of deer that evening, if I remember right.
That was the day that I saw like 33 deer.
Yeah. So, and I go hunt this old trusty spot that I've hunted, 10 times or more and on just a game trail and just kind of hoping for the best. And only saw 5 deer all evening. Like where you guys saw, I think you and him together saw nearly 50 deer or something. It was some crazy number. And so anyway, I see 5 deer, but I have this deer come in. And anyway, long story short, I get a shot at this deer, and it is not great. Like I know the arrow's a little back. It's not great. Deer runs off. But anyway, I give it time. I get down. I walk out there, and the arrow looks pretty good and the blood looks pretty good. And of course, in that snow, you
can just see it.
Yeah, it just jumps out. So, I remember walking out and waiting on you guys to come out. It was well after dark by the time you guys made it out to me. And anyway, I don't remember how much time had passed, but quite a bit of time had passed. And I said, the blood looks good. The arrow looks good. It may be better than what I'm thinking. And so we decided we'd go down and look at it. And sure enough, the arrow looked pretty good. And I think we all kind of decided, hey, I think this deer's dead, So we start trailing this deer, and it's really easy to trail. And somebody, I don't remember who, it was me, you or Josh, somebody shines up there, and there is a deer standing down there looking at us.
Glowing eyeballs.
Right down the blood trail. And we all just immediately thought, oh, there's the deer,
Right, he's alive.
Oh, man, he's still alive, and we're all just standing there trying to decide how we want to go about this. Do we just back out? I mean, what is the deer like? Is he bedded? We couldn't tell. It was dark.
Oh boy.
Clay's like, man, I think that deer's bedded. And it was kind of down a ridge. So
I think it was. I think it was laying down.
It may have been laying down. So we decided the deer.
You got to give me that at least.
Okay, I'll give you that. So Clay just goes, you know what we need to do? And I said, what's that? And he goes, we just need to bull rush that thing. Go over and jump on it. And I'm like, okay, that's something new. We'll give it a shot. So anyway, Clay just says, let's go. I mean, he takes off, and Josh is right behind him. And, I mean, it's just flashlight lights bouncing in the night down the ridge. And they run all the way off the end of this ridge. And I'm like, what is going on? And I just kind of walk up there to a deer dead laying on the ground. And they're still chasing this deer off down the ridge.
Oh, great story.
And finally, they get down at the bottom of the ridge, and I'm like, hey, guys, deer's right here. And they literally just ran right by it. Y'all ran right by the deer. You're in such a rush to get off down the ridge. So that was a great story. I tell that a couple, 3 times a year.
Chasing the fully live deer.
Yeah.
Now, see, here's the way I remember it. I remember seeing the deer and thinking it was bedded and just saying, like, there's the deer right there. And then it got up.
Okay,
and
yeah.
I feel like that's when I said,
let's go.
Sucker's getting away. Yeah. And so we just took off. And now see what you wouldn't know, or you may have known. I got a pretty good history of running stuff down.
Yeah.
I got a pretty good history of running stuff down.
Oh, yeah.
So, that was probably a couple years after. I don't know if I can tell that story on a podcast. That's a tough one. I had to wrestle a deer down in the middle of the road after I hit it with my 4-wheeler one time. Do you remember that?
It's a wonder it didn't hurt you.
Man, well,
on the 4-wheeler part.
Oh, it nearly.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Wow,
saying.
I was running about 55 miles. I mean, I was running full tilt on a Yamaha 350 twin Banshee out in the Ouachita National Forest.
Yeah.
I never saw the deer, and I just felt something just smack me, just bam, smack, and the four-wheeler, it felt like just moved sideways 2 feet, but didn't get caught in the wheels, didn't flip me, didn't wreck me, just slammed on the brakes and turned around, and there was a deer flopping around like going off in the ditch. And so my dad and a bunch of people were way behind us riding slower four-wheelers. I was riding the fast one, leading out front. You know?
Right, oh yeah.
And this deer is clearly going to die, but it's like running off. And so, man, I just take after it and just tackle this deer. and you can't hardly break a deer's neck. Let me just tell you that by twisting its neck. And anyway, my dad comes around and my whole family comes around the corner, and I'm laying in the middle of the road with this flopping deer. We got him. We took him out quickly though, but you can chase one down if you have to. Part of what we wanted to talk about was what you termed the other day, Scott, the death of the sportsman.
Yeah.
When we were talking the other day.
Yeah.
Expound on that to me a little bit.
Well, it's, there's a ton of rabbit trails you can go down while talking about it, but, I think about how I grew up hunting versus how my kids are hunting today and how much difference there is between that. And then compound that to how my dad hunted when he was a kid and so forth, and where hunting is going, I guess I should say. And, when I was, and I'm not an old guy, but here in the Ouachitas, even in the 80s, early 90s, deer were scarce, and it was, a feat to shoot a deer of any kind. Like the smallest buck in the woods, it was a big deal. And it was looked at as a accomplishment to shoot any kind of a deer.
Right.
And, hunting was done so much differently then. You went out here on public land and you walked and walked and walked, and you studied the land, and you studied the mast, and you studied deer movement and deer sign, and you did all these things and tried to find the perfect thing to set up on and to hunt. And in most cases, never saw a thing,
Right.
And it wasn't that there wasn't deer in the area. There just wasn't very many deer in the area. And deer just were spread out so much wider than I feel they are today. And so what it did is it really caused you to study harder and put in harder work on studying natural deer habitat in their own environment and so on. And so I think, where does that come from? Well, we talked about my great uncle and even my grandfather and my dad. They come up when deer numbers in Arkansas were just, horrible. And, where, the total deer harvest in a state in a year, and especially when my great uncle was hunting, there wouldn't even be 1,000 deer checked in is killed in the state of Arkansas in the entire year. But yet they were killing deer back then. And, those guys, hunting was different for them. We hunt. What would you say? Why would you say you hunt? You hunt for what?
That's a loaded question. I do. I mean, I hunt for meat. I hunt for challenge. I hunt for adventure. I hunt to be immersed into wild places.
Yeah, and that's why me and you get along so well. It's because we hunt for other reasons. I think a lot of people right now think about hunting as a sport.
Right.
It's a sport, and every sport you ever play, you're trying to win something, right? You're trying to be a winner or whatever. People in the 50s, go back as far as you want, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, whatever you want, hunted more out of necessity than they did for sport. I mean, I don't think if you asked somebody in 1955, you hunt for sport, and they'd say, no, I hunt to feed my family, or I hunt to, provide for somebody. And so, I think I said it earlier, but that caused people, if you knew what you harvested or what you killed or what you trapped or what you caught fishing or whatever was going to feed your family, you'd learn how to do it pretty well.
Yeah.
If it was something to sustain you to some degree, maybe not 100%, but to sustain, maybe it was 30% of your food, maybe it was 40% of your food, you'd learn how to be very good at it very quickly because your family's counting
Especially
on
if it was scarce.
Yeah.
Like it would have been back then. I mean,
Correct.
it was hard to kill a deer.
Correct. And so, when I think about folks of that time period, let's say 50s, 60s, maybe even to the 70s, a lot of people trapped. Trapping was a big deal. And trapping's becoming less and less popular every year that goes by.
Because back then, furs were worth a whole lot of money.
Correct.
Those hides could be traded for cash money that paid for stuff.
Yeah, and you sit there and think, even in the 1970s, a raccoon hide was bringing $20, and you think, well, man, that's not a whole lot of money. Minimum wage was $1.25.
Yeah.
So you could make in one night coon hunting or coon trapping or however you wanted to do it. You could make in one night what people would work over a week.
That's a big deal.
That was a huge deal. And so, not only was it sustainability for food and what to put on your table, but it was income, and those guys trapped. And I've always said this, but if you want to find a really good hunter, find an overland trapper, and they'll be one of the finest hunters you'll ever be around because they have an understanding of animal behavior and movement unlike anybody else in the woods.
Right.
And those guys, they didn't just trap. While they were trapping, they were paying attention to everything around them. Deer tracks, deer trails, deer sign, all those things. And they studied deer at a level that we don't today. And I'll go a little further into it later on. But those guys, I think you and I were talking here a while back, and I said, back in those days, you inserted yourself into a deer's home, in his ecosystem, if you will, and tried to put yourself in a place within his own domain and tried to harvest that deer. And it was very difficult to do because there wasn't a lot of deer. And so you searched high and low for a buck to hunt back in those days. And then put all the pieces together. Those guys understood travel paths and travel routes, and they understood, scrapes and rubs and stuff that, you saw. We've seen a million articles written over the years on how to read deer scrapes and rubs and all that type of stuff. Those guys understood that stuff in the 50s and the 60s,
Or how to kill deer off of it anyway.
Correct.
They may not have understood the science behind it, but they understood what it meant for deer movement and how to find them. Yeah,
without all the articles to read and all the free information we get to get us ahead of the game,
Yeah.
And so anyway, as times went along, deer hunting has changed a lot, and and before I speak anything, I want everybody to understand what I'm about to say. I'm not trying to offend anybody because here's the thing. I don't care how you like hunting. I don't care if you hunt over bait, if you dog hunt, if you do deer drives, I don't care how you like to hunt. Whatever suits you is fine with me. So what I'm about to say is going to sound like I don't appreciate the way people hunt today. I absolutely do. In fact, I participate in the very thing I'm about to talk about, okay?
Yeah, do it. I hope we offend everybody that listens to the podcast.
So I think sometimes people take it as if I don't agree with certain ways of hunting. Wrong. I don't care. That's to each their own. If you want to hunt over bait, man. I think it's great. But coming back to that, I think today with game management, and I want to almost say that in quotations, right? Game management. We're wanting to manage the deer that we're hunting now, or maybe it's bears we're talking about, maybe it's deer, maybe it's turkeys, whatever. But we're in a game management mode these days, and so now it's about let me create the ecosystem, and invite the deer into it, to the ecosystem that I've created, which is totally different.
Yeah.
So if you take a piece of property, whether you're on a deer hunting lease, or maybe you own a piece of private land that you have access to, and maybe you plant food plots, maybe you put in ponds for water sources, maybe you put out corn feeders and run them year round, or whatever it is to create an ecosystem that is very friendly to deer.
Yeah.
And so nowadays, rather than going into a deer's home, if you will,
right,
and try to hunt a deer from that, we're creating an ecosystem that we know everything about. We know every single square acre of it, where every pinch point is. We create it
into that,
and then we draw them in, and that's not it's not a bad thing.
It's just different.
It's different. It's a different. There's reasons for that. There's a couple of reasons, and I think about where we're going to from hunting. Like, there's in a lot of cases you have to hunt that way. Yeah. Let's say you're on a hunting lease, and with that hunting membership, you get 3 stand locations.
Right.
And that's it.
So you're going to do everything you can to attract deer to that place.
Correct. So, you're going to put your stand up, and you've got to do whatever you can do to get that deer to come in front of that stand.
Yeah.
And which is much different than having, 1 million acres of national forest and trying to, pinpoint a deer down. And so it's not a negative thing. It
could be though, Scott. And I think that's where we're going. And we talked about it on a couple of these recent podcasts, is that what's the end goal of this?
Right.
Like where does it end up?
Correct.
Because me and you, I've killed deer over bait. My kids have killed deer over. We can hunt over bait in Arkansas.
Yeah.
But I think we can, and there's a lot of places where you can't hunt deer over bait. But I think we could say that even just building food plots and manipulating habitat.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's the phrase that we could use.
Sure.
And there's so many different levels that people get involved in this, and there's a lot of nuance inside of it. Like if you've only got 30 acres to hunt in Arkansas,
right,
and it's totally legal to put out bait,
sure,
and you want to kill deer, and you want your kids to kill deer, and boy, I can tell you, I know exactly how that works, because you can sit there all season and see just a handful of deer on that 30 acres and have, struggle to kill a deer.
Right.
Buddy, you put out some corn, you're going to kill some deer.
Right. Yeah.
And it's hard to fault a guy for that.
No, you can't fault a guy for that.
But where does it lead, though?
Yeah, and that's because what we're talking about here. It's not. We're both agreeing here. It's not a bad way to shoot a deer. I mean, that's perfectly acceptable. Like you said, my kids have killed deer over corn. I have no problem with that. Yeah. What I see happening though is even in my own kids, and it's my fault as a parent up until this point. Now my kids are still pretty young.
Yeah. But
they don't understand how to hunt buck sign. They don't understand how to hunt. I could drop my kids off in a national forest and say, go find the best place you feel like to hunt a deer, and they wouldn't know where to get. It'd be overwhelming to them, and they wouldn't understand, to find the pinch points, the funnels, the places, the saddles, and all those things. And if they did, they'd sit there about 2 days and not see anything and be like, let's go back and hunt the corn pile.
Yeah.
Because
it's a conundrum, man.
Yeah, because it's so much easier. It's easier, and it's far more. You're going to see a lot more deer if you do it that way. And that's kind of where we are. I should say kids, adults. We're in a fast food society now. Everybody wants something, they want it right now. And it's, so as a society, we're impatient. We're very impatient, and so whatever we can do to speed it along. And the other thing is man, we're busy.
Yes.
As a society.
We talked about that just last week about how time is a major limiting factor.
It is.
So, our grandfathers, our dads, us, 20 years ago, we just weren't as busy.
Yeah.
We may have worked as much, but there was less, there was more recreational time.
Yep.
For the most part.
Yeah. And in that recreational time, you were outside.
Yeah.
my parents grew up without television. They grew, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
What time, recreational time you had, you did it outside doing something.
Yeah.
And so you found yourself in the woods more. And like I said before, you take my grandfather and my great uncle and some of those guys, I mean, their job was in the woods in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
And so, man, they had all the time in the world to study deer and all that stuff. As fast as we move in today's society, I mean, there's just never any downtime, it feels like. And so whatever you can do to better your chance for the 4 days you get to hunt during season, you know, and that's the other thing you have to consider. You know, a lot of guys only get to hunt maybe 3 or 4 days of the entire season. Maybe they take a week off, 1 week out of the entire hunting season, and they put all their eggs into that basket. They're going to do whatever they can do to increase the odds.
They're gonna socially and functionally be pressured to do whatever the regional norm is.
Yeah.
I mean, like if you're hunting on a deer lease that's 1,300 acres,
Yeah.
and there's 25 guys on that deer lease, and all those 25 guys are putting out corn in front of their deer stand, then if you're going to be successful on that lease, you're going to have to put out corn in front of your deer stand.
Correct.
I mean, you know, there's probably a deeper way of thinking about it that might be successful, but you know, that's the idea.
Correct.
And so Mike, did you have something?
Yeah, as we're discussing this, the thing that I'm thinking about is Scott, is how much does this change the value of hunting?
Yeah.
You know what you value it more because you worked, and it was part of even for your grandfather and your father, it was part of a lifestyle.
Yep.
It was the way they lived. It wasn't just something they did for recreation. It was part of their life and something that was was a necessity. But you know, as it becomes easier, and the pressure as the habitat changes, and as people have less time, and you know, food plots and all this, I just think about what happens to the value of hunting.
Right.
You know, how does a hunter value hunting?
And that's
today?
ultimately what we're sniffing out.
That's right.
Is like, wait a minute, does this have the value that it used to?
Right.
But it's a slippery slope, because not everybody, and this is where I've come to, and I don't know the answer, is that not everybody has to value hunting like you and I do, Scott.
Right.
Mike doesn't.
Right.
I mean, really, Mike isn't that serious of a hunter.
Right.
Like, he's not trying to be.
Right.
It's just a small part of his life, pretty small. Me and you, it's a big part of our life.
It is.
It's a big part of our culture, our history. And so not everybody has to be like me and you.
Yep.
And that's the hard part, because if we cheapen it, and I mean, I'm a massive proponent for baiting bears, and so I mean,
sure.
like there's all kind of nuance and all kind of different stories.
Yeah.
But the problem is that if we make it so easy, will there come a day when our kids, because they've not really earned it, when they don't really value it and they quit fighting for it?
Correct.
In 50 years from now, when you and I are dang near 100, Scott,
Yeah.
our kids will be like, hunting's not that important to me.
Right.
So therein lies the thing. Johnny Carroll saying the other day told me, he quoted another author that said, we don't need more hunters, we need better hunters. Because we talk about needing more hunters.
Right.
Like for this thing to persist.
Yep.
And ultimately, by liberalizing game laws, by making things easier, like we're making it easier for people to become hunters.
Right.
And so the conversation we had was like, what if we took away everything that made it easy and just made it hard?
Right.
And my point was, well, we'd lose everybody. We'd snuff it out.
Yep.
But his point was, maybe we wouldn't. Maybe we don't need more hunters. Maybe we need better. And by better hunters, it doesn't mean guys that are successful killing bigger bucks.
Yeah.
By better hunters, meaning people that really have a rich, deep experience inside of hunting that's valuable for their life, that they want to bring forward into future generations.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
But at the same time, last podcast, I had a new hunter on good friend of mine. And I encouraged him. I said, man, you don't have to be a serious hunter. You can hunt 2 days a year. Mm-hmm. And that just be all the hunting you do. And you have as much input into conservation in some ways as I do. Because a lot of what we talk about now is conservation dollars. Yeah. Like, what money does hunting produce that is going to save habitat, that's going to it's that is more crucial in different parts of the country than maybe even here. But, like, you know, if there's no hunters, Arkansas Game and Fish Commission isn't funded. Probably about half of their funding comes from, I don't know if that's the exact data, but a lot of their funding comes from sale of hunting licenses. Well, Jonathan Webster hunts 2 days a year and buys a $25 sportsman's license. Clay Newcomb hunts X number of days a year, buys a $25 hunting license, just the same.
Right.
So he's valuable. But if he's hunting 2 days a year in Arkansas, he's probably going to be sitting over some corn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is he bad for that?
Well, that's the only 2 days he's got. So, yeah.
Right.
I mean, golly. You got to do
But
yeah.
Are his kids going to value hunting the way that our kids hopefully do?
Yeah. Yeah, and that makes me worry. You know, I thought about something today. I was sitting there thinking, you know, you said if we water, or if we cheapen it, or if we water it down, or if we make it too easy, or will kids have a deep appreciation for hunting like you and I do? And you said, well, you don't have to have a deep appreciation. I get that.
Yeah.
But somebody does in the future. That's my problem is in the future's infinity or whatever. But you've got 10 years from now, or let's say when me and you are gone and our kids are grown men with their own families, will they have an appreciation for hunting that me and you did? And what I worry about is if they don't, are they going to fight for it as hard as me and you would fight for our ability to hunt every day?
Right.
And so that worries me in the future.
I think the answer to that is no, they wouldn't.
Yeah. And I worry about that.
I mean, life is full of fights.
Yeah.
And if you don't really believe in something, you're not going to. I mean, life is full of fights in terms of a metaphorical fight of just time.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's real easy for the kids of even hunters to not really latch onto it because of the pull of society. It's so strong right now on our kids.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily bad, but, I mean, just like there's so much.
Yeah.
A kid could be raised up by a guy like me or you and not even be a hunter.
Right.
Which is just bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean,
sure.
Because there's so much pulling on them.
Yep.
So, I mean, the will they value hunting enough to even teach their kids?
Right.
That's the question.
Yeah.
And then therein lies another question. Why do we care if hunting lasts beyond us?
Our lifetime. That's right.
Why do we care? Why do you care?
Yeah. And that's where you arrive when you start thinking about that. You think, well, if it doesn't matter to our kids, what does it matter to us when we're gone?
Yep.
I mean, I get exactly what you're saying.
Well, do you have an answer?
I don't. I mean, I feel like.
Do you have an answer, Mike? I'm interrupted both of you. I think that, and I said this before. I said it on the last podcast. I'll say it again. But if my sons couldn't go up on this mountain over here and hunt a bear 30 years from now, 40 years from now, if my son, Bear Newcomb, couldn't drive up there, park his truck, walk up there and kill a bear, I fear that he would be something different than me.
Yeah.
That may not be in and of itself wrong, but we have survived as a people. I mean, the whole idea of parenthood is that you're passing values into your kids.
That's right.
You're passing values because whatever we did worked for us. I mean, do you see the logic? I mean, like, as a parent, you want your kid essentially to be kind of like you. You don't raise up a kid just hoping they're going to go do something radically different than you. And I'm not saying that's necessarily right or wrong, but just that's the nature of parenthood.
Yep.
Deep down inside, I want my sons to kind of be like me. And now they may not be big hunters, and I've told them deliberately many times, you don't have to take hunting as serious as I have. Kind of de-escalating the pressure because I take it serious. It's my job. I mean, it's like we talk about it is a big part of our life, and I've intentionally de-escalated that inside my family. Kind of let them approach hunting at their own pace, you know.
Yep.
But deep down, I hope that they value it, and I hope that, you know, should time persist and I grow to be an old man and can't go up on that mountain, that they come and tell me stories of them and their sons going up on that mountain.
Yep.
And that would be valuable to me.
Yep.
I think that's true of every generation, like you said. I think stonemasons building Gothic cathedrals in 1250 wanted their children to be stonemasons.
Yeah.
And then there came a day where technology moved, priorities moved, you know, life goes on, and it's continually changes. And there came a day where they didn't need the stonemasons anymore. And there was a generation that said, well, I guess my kids aren't going to be stonemasons because we don't build cathedrals anymore.
Yeah.
And that's true of, you can look at that in many, many areas of life where parents hope their children have this experience or value this because it's so important to the parent. But things move on, and those opportunities have changed. The circumstances have changed.
So does that mean, I mean, some people would predict that modern hunting that we know in North America will not exist as it is in the next 50, 60 years.
Yeah.
That's a bizarre and scary thought to me.
It is.
I mean, and it's true. We are sheltered, Scott, living here in Arkansas.
Sure.
But there, and you've heard me talk about it. Being on the national bear scene of all scenes, I see firsthand what's happening nationally. And there is some good news inside of hunter recruitment and inside of public perception of hunting.
Yep.
But with what we're talking about is even a layer deeper than that. We're talking about not what other people think of us or not a democratic process that's going to influence our lives. We're talking about the very fabric of hunting changing, you know, and ultimately in 40, 50 years, will the hunters be the same? But could they have said the same thing in 1800 when Gerstocker was pounding around out in these mountains in buckskin that he made, shooting deer with, single shot round bullet muzzleloaders?
Yeah.
I mean, like, would he have said, man, these guys coming up aren't going to know about this.
Right.
And it's going to run hunting. I don't know. He probably did. Mike, briefly talk about photography. You said something earlier about how Mike drew the same parallel to what we're saying about photography.
Oh, okay.
About how the guys used to haul in, like, photography used to be so hard, and now it's so easy.
Yes.
And in some ways it has cheapened this thing.
Yes. Oh, very much so. I was telling Clay about photographers that were, especially out west, a guy by the name of Edward Mybridge, William Henry Jackson, Edward Curtis. There are a number of them that, especially the guys who were the first guys who went into Yosemite Valley, they would have to backpack in about a ton of equipment with probably 6, 7, 8 mules. There were no roads, and it would take an entire summer. And they had big glass plate negatives, and it was, when you set up for a scene, you better make sure it's what you want, and you better get it right, because you only had so many negatives that you could carry with you. And so it was a lot of hard work. You had to know the light, the conditions. They would scout for days to find the best vantage point. And so when they came back with a negative and then made a print out of it, I mean, it was something kind of like coming home with that one doe out of the Ouachitas.
Yeah.
This is special to me. And then you advance forward, and the films got different. Film came out, and cameras got different, and they got much, much, much smaller. And the sense of craft, and I think that's what I feel in your family, is just a sense of craft of hunting.
Yeah.
And that sense of craft began to be lost inside of photography. You would spend hours in a dark room and trying to get a perfect print and making sure you understood how to develop the negative. And and very sensitive, learning how to be very sensitive to the light because of that. And then the digital came age, and this is something, that's definitely in our lifetime. I can almost tell you the year, 1999, 98, 99. A massive shift took place inside of photography, and by 2006, photographers were throwing away darkroom equipment and selling every film camera they had, and the digital age was absolutely here, and now everybody is a photographer.
Yeah.
Everybody can produce 30 by 40 gigantic prints in their house with their own printer, and
what's that done? As someone who's, is it good or is it bad? Can you answer it?
I've never been able to say whether it's good or bad. I can only say that it is.
It just is what it is.
It is what it is. And there's part of me that misses the craft and misses that sense of craft because
right.
a life was invested inside of it and a love was developed inside of it. Now it's just something that feels, it's easy. It's quick.
It's easy.
It's quick, and it's a quick return, and there's a quick reward, and you're off to the next thing.
I like that you brought that word in. That it was craft. It was a craft, like the craft of hunting.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what a lot of these modern things that we're doing takes away.
That's right.
Takes away the craft of it, and that's what we value inside of hunting.
Yep.
But at the same time, the only reason Clay Newcomb's a photographer is because of digital cameras, Mike Schultz.
There you go.
Yeah.
And the only reason some of these guys are hunting is because it's easier than it used to be.
Yeah.
Every ounce of society, what we're experiencing is just a societal shift in every way. I think about coon hunting.
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't be a coon hunter today if it wasn't for GPS technology. When I was a kid in these mountains, turning loose dogs that just had a leather collar on.
Yeah.
Like for real.
Sure.
Dogs go out of hearing, you don't know where they're at, you stay out all night.
Right.
Geez, I don't know if I would be a coon hunter if I didn't have GPS, because GPS, you know exactly where they're at. If they're not barking and they're half a mile away, you drive over there and catch them and go home.
Right.
And, they're going towards a road and they're going to get out on the highway and get hit. You tone them.
Yeah.
And they turn around and come back. Like, you would have never known that. So my point is, an old coon hunter could be sitting here going, Clay, you don't even know what coon hunting is.
No.
Coon hunting is when you turn a dog loose and you're committed.
Yeah.
You're committed to listen to his bark. You're committed to know where he's probably going to run. You're committed to know, you know the craft of coon. You know that if you turn him loose here, that dog's probably going to end up on the backside of that ridge, way up in that hollow tree.
Yep.
Clay Newcomb doesn't know that because Clay has a GPS.
Yeah.
And it's just like, So I think what we're experiencing is happening all through society. But our problem is that the consequences of what we're talking about is significant.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to quit. Photography isn't going to cease to exist because
That's correct.
People, it makes it easier. It's actually
That's
probably
correct.
going to grow
It's proliferated. Absolutely.
But maybe that's what is happening with hunting. And that's the question, is if we make it easier, are more people going to do it and it's going to become, something better than it was? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I see how you can arrive at that.
Or is it going to cheapen it so much that when it really gets down to brass tacks, that they're going to go, it's not that valuable? I don't know.
I don't either. It's interesting.
Scott, I had you on here so you could tell us the answers.
Yeah, well. I don't know if I have an answer for that. But, technology is driving everything.
Yeah.
Just think about how one device, I think the single biggest device that has changed hunting over the past, let's just say 20 years, and you could probably narrow it down more than that, and it has to do with photography.
Yeah.
Is a
Mike's
game
making
camera.
his camera photos.
Trail cam.
Nothing has changed hunting more, in my opinion, than a trail camera.
Yeah.
Trail camera
absolutely.
has forever changed hunting.
Yeah.
And I think about, man, if I'd had some trail cameras when I was growing up out here in the Ouachitas, and you go, all year without seeing a deer sometimes, what would I have given to put a trail camera on that scrape that I found? So I could just get a glimpse of the deer. You know,
Yeah.
what is that, you know? But then I think about it and I think, what made it so fun was the unknown of what that deer was.
Yeah.
You know, you laid in bed at night, drifting off into sleep, thinking about how big that deer was or how big he could be or whatever. And it was that unknown to me that made it fun. I absolutely loved it, you know, not knowing back then. Nowadays, it's like, you know, we got names for all of our deer and, you know, that's a split time.
Well, you gave a good example earlier to me. You said that somebody will text you a picture of a deer.
Yeah.
And they'll say, how old do you think that deer is?
Yeah.
And you'll say, that's probably a 2 or 3 year old deer. And they'll go, well, shoot. I don't shoot 2 or 3 year old deer.
Yeah.
I mean, as a condensed version.
Yeah.
And Scott's point was that they would, if they actually saw that deer in the woods and didn't have it on camera, they'd shoot it in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
And be probably thrilled with it. But because we have this new tool for analysis and that's social too. Tell about the story about your boy's deer, if you're comfortable telling that.
Yeah, so anyway, I've got a lot of pros and cons to cameras. I just want to tell you that. But anyhow, my son last year killed a really nice deer. I mean, the deer wasn't a day over 2.5 years old. It was an 8-point. Biggest deer he's ever killed. So it was his personal best, if you will. You know,
Yep.
And the only person prouder than him for killing that deer was me. I just thought it was, you know, he'd hit over the moon. You know.
Yeah.
He killed this deer, and of course, we took pictures of it on his phone and this, that, and the other, and he took it to school the next day. Couldn't wait to show, you know, just like me and you, can't wait to show each other what we killed.
Show his buddies.
Yeah, so he went to school, and he showed it to, you know, a couple of his buddies, and, you know, he come home from school, and I said, well, what'd your buddies think about the deer you killed? And he's like, oh, they told me I should have waited. And I said, what? And they said, yeah. You know, first friend I asked said, why'd you shoot that deer? You should let him grow another year or two, you know. And another kid was like, why'd you shoot that deer? You know, every kid was just almost critical of him shooting this deer. And it was obviously a young deer. But it was the best deer he had ever killed in his life. And probably the best deer those kids would have ever killed in their life.
They've been taught.
Yeah. So it came down to, you know, we've almost created a sense of, and here's the thing, I believe in deer management. If you want to grow big deer and you want to do all that stuff and you got the time to do it, hey, more power to you. I'm all about it. But when you got guys that text message you and say, hey, you think I ought to let this deer grow up? And my response to that person is, I don't know. Would you be happy with that deer? I mean, if you would
science.
If you would be happy with that deer,
Yeah.
then shoot the deer. You know, I mean, quit worrying about whether or not it's 5 or it's 4 or it's a 125 or a 140 or what it may or may not ever be or whatever.
Yeah.
If you look at that deer and in your heart, you want to kill that deer, then kill that deer. That's my whole thing is we get so caught up, and I believe that comes from a lot of social pressure. Just like my son, he was so proud but was almost shamed.
Yeah, he was shamed
for shooting this deer.
You pulled out a picture on your phone earlier.
Yeah,
Mike, Scott will show it to you maybe.
Yeah, I'd like to
me
see
and
it.
Scott back in 2001, I think it was, or 2.
Yeah,
and Scott had killed a 6-point buck that probably had a total of 25 inches on his head.
maybe.
Yeah. And he'd killed a doe and a buck that day on public land. And there was a bunch of us that were hunting together. And, I mean, we thought enough of those deer to, like,
we got a group picture.
Picture. And that I remember just thinking that was, like, the coolest day ever.
Yeah.
And just a little bitty 6-point buck. And Scott said, man, I wish we could go back to that. And I thought when I look at that picture, I just think, dang, that was fun.
Yeah.
You know, this picture to me strikes me. It's a great photograph. All these men standing around supporting him, and yet it's almost counterculture today You know,
Yeah.
You would think it would be a 160 class buck on the ground or something.
Yeah,
to
yeah.
have that photograph.
Yeah.
You know?
We went way out of our way to do that.
Yeah, I just think about that deer today, and we've arrived at a place now that, you know, if you shot that little 6-point, you'd be ashamed to tell anybody about
Well,
it.
your son's deer was bigger than that one.
Yeah, it was much larger than this deer in the, the picture. But I don't know. I worry about stuff like that. You know, I feel like I shot that deer because it meant something to me. You know, I mean, oh my gosh, it was public land, like you said. We hunted hard all week, if you'll remember, and this really hadn't had any luck at all. And when we killed that deer, it was kind of like finally, you know, we've put all the pieces together and we finally produced something, you know. And we were so proud of that deer. And today, man, I don't know. I feel like we've gotten a place where, and I think if you search the hearts of men, if you will, women, whatever, hunters, and said, if you took the social pressure out of it, they'd shoot those deer all day long.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
They would be happy, but because of the social pressure that they feel from, you know, outside sources, whatever, they don't shoot, you know, they question whether or not they want to shoot that deer.
Well, the hunting world is it's never apples to apples.
Yep.
Like the culture has been highly pressured by Midwestern whitetail television of the 90s even, when guys were in the Midwest killing big deer, and all of a sudden that became the standard. And those deer weren't everywhere. Those opportunities weren't everywhere. They still aren't everywhere. And so you can't take the standards of the Midwest, Kansas, and southern Iowa, and put them in the Ouachita Mountains of Arkansas.
Right.
You'll tear yourself apart.
Yeah.
But our world's so connected now that it's hard not to.
Yeah.
And that's what those boys that were giving your boy a hard time.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been watching Outdoor Channel.
Yeah.
And it's just a can of worms. But I think the answer is that every family has the right to build their own hunting culture and values. And that's what I'm working hard to do inside of my family. Right. And I've seen holes in my parenting that I have noticed of late.
Yeah.
I really have.
Oh, I have too.
And you know, I'm making very intentional decisions to change some of the things that I'm doing. But my kids do know that they understand value inside of a hunt.
Yep.
They understand that a deer taken this way, it might step on somebody's toes, but is less valuable. Now, from a meat perspective, from a functional perspective, from a ration, you know, it's not. We're getting meat, but humans are complex animals. We're not animals. We're complex beings that, you know, I'm able to assign value here and assign value here. And there are certain things that have a higher value to me than other things, even though we get the same meat, which is equal value. If we're just talking about gathering meat, none of this matters.
That's right.
None of it matters a bit. But the truth is, we're not just talking about gathering meat. We're complex. This is a complex thing. So we're talking about we're talking about a whole bunch of different stuff. But
yeah. You know, it's funny. I think we talked on the phone here a while back. I got a really good friend, lives in Northwest Arkansas. In fact, he showed me the way to Madison County Wildlife Management Area back in the day, and you know him really well. And, you know, I credit him to allowing me into his kind of honey hole, if you will, up in Northwest Arkansas. And anyway, we hunted a lot together back then. And, you know, he wasn't in that photograph we were talking about earlier, but, you know, he was in on a lot of hunts with me up there. And, you know, we were tickled to death to shoot a 2-year-old basket rack 8-point buck with our bow. I mean, it meant more to me than some of the biggest bucks I've killed in my lifetime. Yep. Those hunts that I went on up there. And, you know, I told you, been kind of in a funny place about hunting. You know, it's all kind of snowballed on me. The whole, you know, whether it be the shaming for shooting smaller deer, whether it be how we've changed hunting from the craft, as Mike said earlier, to more of a let's build a an ecosystem and invite deer into it kind of thing. All that's kind of just compounded on me here in the last few years. And every year I find myself struggling a little more to make sense of all of it. And I just wondered if I was by myself. I kind of think, am I just out here on an island by myself feeling this way or whatever? And so it's just really unique that he calls me the other day. We're talking on the phone, and he says, man, he goes, I'm kind of I'm going through a midlife crisis on this deer hunting. and that's the way he put it,
Yeah.
And I kind of thought, I've never thought about it like that. And I said, yeah, carry on. I'm listening. And he's like, man, I just don't know what to do. He said, I've got game cameras up all over the place. I got these big deer on camera, and, I'm spending all my time hunting 1 or 2 deer. And, I'm realizing that the joy that I used to experience with hunting when we used to go shoot does and just whatever we could get within bow range back years ago, the joy I experienced in that is gone. It's me and this deer. I don't have a group with me. I don't have a bunch of guys to hunt with because it's me and this deer that I've got on camera. And
he can't invite you to go on that.
Yeah. And he said, I've realized, and he goes, I want to shoot these big deer. I feel like there's pressure on me to shoot these big deer. He said that.
Yes.
And he's killed a lot of big deer. Like I told you the other day, I think he, he's killed more Pope and Young class deer than anybody I know in the past 20 years, probably.
Yeah.
And he said, man, I just don't, I'm almost expected now to only shoot these big deer. It's become the expectation for me to shoot big deer and not, young deer or whatever. And he said, so I'm questioning how much I really enjoy this. He said, it's almost unenjoyable. And so anyway, we talk about that, and the whole time I'm talking to him, I'm thinking, man, have you been reading my mind? I mean, that's exactly the way I feel. I feel the same way you feel about this.
Yeah.
There's almost an expectation now that you deliver some big deer every year, every other year, or whatever. And, the minute you stop enjoying it, you need to slow down and just think about it again. Reevaluate. I've done my best, and the thing that's helped me over the past couple of years is I have basically just started hunting public land again. Just, there for a while I got on some leases and did some of that for a while, and like you said, you're in competition with everybody else on a lease, and so you find yourself hunting in a way that you don't really like to hunt, but you have to hunt in order to compete with the people on the lease. And I thought, man, I'm shooting deer, but if I'm honest with myself, I'm not just having the greatest time. But going back to hunting public land, there's a management area here that me and you both have hunted in our lifetimes that I value a lot, and I've hunted a lot on. Hunting the Ouachita Mountains up here, I know that my chances of shooting a deer are far less. Even seeing a deer are far less. But here's the other thing. I haven't put a game camera on a tree in 4 or 5 years. I've just quit it. And I find myself at the end of the day really enjoying hunting a little bit more.
Well, let me tell you something else. You kill big deer too.
Yeah. And
there's it sounds like Scott's building up to say that he's not been a very successful hunter in recent years. We're looking at a deer right there that he killed a month ago that is a monster public land Arkansas buck.
You know what the greatest thing, the greatest appreciation for that deer is for me?
I know what you're going to say.
I've never seen that deer before.
I knew you were going to say that.
I'd never laid eyes on that deer.
But you knew you play, even if you never knew that deer was there, you absolutely did your homework. I mean, I know you knew exactly what you were doing when you killed that deer, even though you never had a trail camera up.
Well, it was old school.
It was actually almost cheating what you did, Scott.
Yeah, it was cheating.
You knew that ground so well and those deer movements so well.
It was old school.
Almost as if it was craft.
Yeah, it was craft. It really was that one. But that's exactly what that deer was. I found the sign. I went in there and just just faith. It was I just had to.
Well, you got away from people too. You did some stuff that helped you get way away from people on public land without,
Yeah.
You didn't use a mule,
No.
but you got away from people.
Right. And it's one of those deals where I was acceptant of the fact that when I see the deer that's made this sign, it may not be a very big deer, but it didn't matter to me. I was going to shoot whatever deer was making that sign in there. I'd made my mind up. I didn't have to know that it was a 145 or 50-inch deer or whatever. I didn't have to know any of that. I knew that if I could put the pieces of the puzzle together and kill and get in range of that deer, I was going to shoot that deer.
Yeah.
And, of course, there was probably more than one buck in there. Now, who knows? Maybe I didn't even shoot the biggest one in there. I don't know. But I don't care.
Yeah.
The deer I shot, plenty good enough for me. You know, and maybe there was a bigger one in there. And that's the deal. Had I had a game camera in there and there was one twice that big in there, would I have shot that deer? Would I have? I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
it would have been torn if you did. I guarantee you that.
And so the way it is now, I don't know that. So that deer right over there makes me as happy as I could be about it, you know?
Yeah.
And so it's funny, too. I was telling you about my friend up Northwest Arkansas. I don't know if I should mention his name or not because I don't know if he'd want me to. But I figure he wouldn't care, but I don't know. I don't want to.
Yeah.
But anyway, he texted me, I think it was last week or week before, and he said, "Man, you inspired me on the telephone the other day." And I said, "What?" He goes, "Man," he said, "I went to Missouri, place I've never been before, found some sign, got in a tree where I felt I needed to be, and shot this buck." And he has a picture of this really nice buck. Yeah. And never had seen it before, didn't have game cameras on the tree, just went up there old school and
killed it.
And hunted some sign and some faith and got up in a tree and killed this deer, and he is so proud of it. And, not as big as the ones he had on camera back in Arkansas or any of that stuff, but just thrilled to death about that deer that he killed. Yeah. And so, that I think you got to get back to that sometimes. I think about you. I've been struggling the last few years as an archery hunter. I love to archery hunt, absolutely love it. But if I'm honest with myself, I don't get quite what I got out of it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But you going back to traditional, having the best archery equipment money can buy, and now you're shooting a stick with a string on it and killing animals with it. And there's something very organic about that I just love it. I think that's where.
But it brought back something that I felt like I had lost.
Yeah, there you go. And I think that's what you're in search of the whole time. Whether it's me going back and hunting public land and committing to that and just getting back into that and doing away with game cameras and making it, getting back to the roots of it, I guess.
Yeah.
Or like in your case, switching back or going to. No switching back to it. You started out with compounds and did all that.
Yeah.
But going to traditional archery equipment and giving yourself a new challenge.
It brought back something that I used to have with a compound bow.
Yeah. That
I lost with a compound bow.
Right.
But I get it back when I have that trad bow in hand.
That's right. Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, and I admire you for that. And I've got there's a friend here in town, you as well, who's done the same thing. He told me a few years ago, he said, "Man, I'm just kind of losing interest and this, that, and the other." And he went and got him a trad bow, and that's all he talks about now. He's just back into it, 110%. So
I think I identify with what you're saying about the hunting midlife crisis.
Yeah.
When it comes to whitetails and locally, massively. I really do. Yeah. I mean, we're too deep in this for me to get into it, but I just want to say I 100% identify, and I think a lot of people will identify with that hunting midlife crisis.
Yeah.
Especially guys that have hunted their whole life.
Yeah.
Guys that are just getting into it, it may be a little different, and that's good. And
it's funny you say that. I think some of the funnest hunting I do now, we had a friend this year, we take we take a week off every year during Halloween, and it's an archery hunt, and it's really it's on the front door of the rut. It's really a good time to be in the woods. This year it wasn't as good. Rut fell a little later this year. It's a little different. But we had a guy in camp who had never killed a deer with a bow. And I'm telling you, me and my friend Tim that was in camp with us, that's all we wanted to accomplish that week.
And that was just as fun
Yeah.
as anything.
And we put him in absolutely the best place that you could possibly find. And it was public land. And we'd done all the scouting. We did the homework for the guy. It was basically a guided hunt. You know, I mean, we did all the homework.
Yeah.
We told him which tree to get in. We did all the work for him. But we wanted so bad for him to kill a deer that it didn't matter what we did. You know.
Yeah.
And of course we got that done, and that was the greatest.
So he killed a deer.
Yeah, he killed a really nice 8-point.
Really?
Yeah, he did. Biggest buck of the week for sure. I mean, just a really nice deer. And he was just tickled to death. And I don't know. I really believe that Tim and I were probably more proud of that deer than he was. I really feel that way. You know, I mean, he was excited. Don't get me wrong, but to me, seeing that excitement in a new hunter puts a little bit in me too, you know, because you get to see them go through it and get excited, and oh man, that's what it's all about. And I miss a little bit of that, and to see, and that's why I hunt so much with my kids now. When I have free time to hunt now, you know, 99% of that I'm taking one of my boys, or we're doing something hunting together, because they get excited. You know, they still have that fire that, you know, they get nervous, they get all those things, you know, and that's what it's all about. It really is. So I take a lot of turkey hunters on their first hunt, you know, and that's something I really like to do. I've killed a lot of turkeys in my life, and if I don't kill another one, that's okay. But man, when I take somebody and set them down in front of me and call up a turkey and get to sit there and get a front row seat to somebody, you know, going through that stress of trying to stay still and doing all that, and they're shaking and they're all, man, it just don't get any better than that. Yeah, it just doesn't get any better.
Scott, does that take you back?
It does.
In a way, you're kind of seeing it through their eyes.
I am. That's exactly what it is. I think it brings back those old feelings of when you used to get that way and all that. And man, I don't know. I think we're just all searching for we want so bad for our kids. You said it earlier. We want so bad for our kids to be as excited about it as we are, and the person who you take hunting, you want him to be just as excited as you are or were, and you want all those things, and you know
I was thinking though that even if they don't follow in your footsteps, the values that you impart inside of your pursuit, and they're seeing you and your craft, it does implant something in them that they will use inside of their life. It will be part of who they are and what they do. It may not look the same. It may not be in the same area of expertise or that type of thing, but it does implant something in them. Your excitement about it, and you're in the depth of richness. That's a good point,
Mike.
Yeah,
because you know, anything that we do, I mean, really, I hope that my sons, ultimately what I want my kids to become is really probably people that are capable of excellence and craft inside of something. And I've chosen hunting to dedicate myself to.
That's right.
You know, but because it's like, would I want my son to just grow up and be a big buck killer, but be a terrible employee and father? And no.
Right.
What I want him to be is like a whole human that, but I see his connection to wild places and wildlife and hunting as being a part of that, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope that it would be. I see what you're saying. I didn't say it the right way there, Mike, but what you're saying is that if your dad was a woodcraft, you know, was a great, you know, woodworker, you may not be a woodworker, but you're going to take that excellence that he had inside of that and apply it in something else maybe.
Yeah, and learning how to manage that also, like you know, Scott's talking about, you know, this kind of almost like rebirth. That's important because you're going back to really the important thing. Why do I do this?
Yeah.
You know, why is it important to me? And that's the thing to share with your I think with the next generation. Why do we do this? Yeah. Why is it important?
Yeah.
and then again they can apply that into their life.
Yeah. Well, guys, closing thoughts. Scott, closing thought. We didn't talk about probably everything we talked about, but we'll do another one of these days.
No, I really enjoyed it. You know, I've always admired you, Clay, and because I think we think a lot alike. You know, the value in hunting, passing on the tradition, the heritage, and all those things.
Yeah.
You know, I love what you do with your videography and you breaking your kids into it and all that type of stuff. And I think my favorite videos are when you've got one of your kids with you. And, and maybe you're not even successful that hunt or whatever. I know River had a couple of rough deals, but, that's hunting, and that's all part of the process, and I think it's great. And I appreciate that you allow us into I get to see how you manage your kids and through the hunting landscape and all that, and I think it's great. And I hope hunting tradition in my family goes on generation after generation, but all we can do is manage today and and do what we can to, like Mike said, maybe they don't take an appreciation for it, but we instill something in them through that process that carries on for generations to come. So, man, I appreciate you bringing me on. Love just having conversations. This is like a conversation me and you have on the phone a lot of times driving down the road.
Yeah, exactly.
And so we make a podcast.
That's really what we're trying to replicate here. I wish we could have. Yeah, sometimes you wish you had stuff recorded sometimes.
Yeah, for sure.
No.
But been fun. Really
man.
Enjoyed it. Really
Mike,
enjoyed it.
Closing thoughts. What do you think about what we just talked about?
I thought it was really rich and deep, and I appreciate you inviting me in on this, Clay, to sit here and listen and to meet Scott and get to know him better, and really see his heart for hunting and for his family.
Yeah.
Great time for me tonight. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's been fun.
Well, gentlemen, keep the wild places wild, because that's where the bears live.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.